If you just had one of the worst holidays of your life and you're quietly wondering what happens next with the house, the kids, and the money, stay here. I'm Chris Rainwaters, renegade ritualist and your favorite real estate witch. I help people navigate major life transitions like buying a home, selling one, or figuring out what to do when the life you built no longer fits. And I've walked dozens of people through exactly this moment. My job here isn't to tell you what decisions to make. It's to help you slow the spiral, understand your options, and regain a sense of control, especially when emotions are running high. Maybe he gave you another gift that made it painfully clear that he still doesn't know you or see you. Maybe she snapped at you and belittled you in front of your family for the last time. Maybe you spent the drive home staring out the window, realizing that you're done pretending that this is fine. You might be sad or scared. You might be quietly panicking inside and haven't told anyone yet. So you came to YouTube, not for drama or validation, but because you need a way forward that actually makes sense for you. If this is the video you found yourself clicking after the holidays, let's slow this moment down and get oriented. What comes next doesn't have to be chaos. So before we go any further, let's ground this moment down for a second. A lot of people reach this point right after the holidays. Once everything slows down, once the obligations and expectations ease up, there's finally space to notice what's been building for a while. This isn't just anecdotal either. Divorce consultations and filings tend to increase in the early months of the year. That pattern shows up consistently. So if things came into focus for you recently, I want you to know that you are not alone in that experience, not even close. Many people arrive here in a similar way after a long period of trying really hard to make things work. Okay, before we get into what to do, I want to point out a few common mistakes that I see at this stage. The first is trying to decide everything at once. People jump straight into questions like, am I keeping the house? Or what's custody gonna look like? Before they actually understand their situation. That usually makes things harder, not clearer. Another mistake is making decisions before the facts are fully known. When you don't yet know how the house is titled, what it's worth, or what your legal options look like, you're trying to make decisions without the full picture. And that's hard, especially when emotions are already running high. I also see people hesitate to talk to professionals at this stage because they think that they're not ready yet. Like it's too big a step. Like calling a lawyer or a realtor somehow means that they're fully committing to something before they're sure. But those early conversations are often what bring the most clarity. That context makes everything else way easier to think about and plan for. And finally, a lot of people rush because they think slowing down means nothing is happening. In reality, this stage is about orientation, understanding what exists, knowing what's on the table, and letting decisions come from clarity instead of pressure. That's how you avoid unnecessary mess later. Let's take a quick breath together. And you may want to grab a pen and a piece of paper to take some notes, unless, of course, you don't want to leave a paper trail. Totally get that. Fair. So at this point, the most helpful thing that you can do is get clear on the basics of your situation. Start with the house. I know, shocking coming from a realtor, but stay with me. Look at whose name is on the title. Look at whose name is on the mortgage. Check whether both of you are on both or what's going on there. If there are joint credit cards, home equity lines, or loans tied to the property, make a note of those too. This is about knowing the layout before you make any decisions or changes. Next, get an accurate sense of your home's value. And I don't mean a zestimate. Zillow is fun, but this is real life. Reach out to a trusted real estate professional who knows your area. If you don't know one, I am more than happy to help you find one. I have an extensive network all across the US, and it's not brokerage related, it's full grassroots. Anyway, you don't need to decide what you're doing with the house yet, but you do need to know what you're working with. The house is usually the biggest shared asset, and it quietly affects almost every option down the line. Next, if you haven't already, schedule a consultation with a divorce attorney. This doesn't mean that you're filing for divorce or having that uncomfortable conversation with the person you are currently married to yet. It just means that you're asking questions and gathering information. Geez, so rude. And honestly, these things are just good to know in general. One conversation can clarify how the house is treated, what timelines look like, and what choices you actually have, which is information most people wish they had sooner rather than later. And finally, think about the support that you're gonna need as you walk through this huge change and choose one or two steady people, a therapist, a trusted friend, or a professional who's seen this process before, a person who gives you a place to sort through thoughts and feelings before you're ready to talk more openly. This stage is just about getting clear on what exists and what you're working with, so the next step feels manageable instead of overwhelming. Now, I want to tell you something that might take a little pressure off. You do not need to have all the answers right now. You don't need to make any decisions. You don't need to decide whether that you're keeping the house or selling it, or how custody will work, or what you're going to say, or when you're going to say it. A lot of people feel like once they admit something isn't working, that they're supposed to immediately know the entire plan. That's not how this actually unfolds, though. So right now, your job isn't to solve everything. It's to understand what's on the table so that you're not making decisions from panic or exhaustion. Big emotions are gonna show up here, so let them move through before you make any irreversible decisions. Clarity works way better than reaction. There's a reason that people say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I digress. So once you know how the house is structured, what it's worth, what your legal options look like, you can take your time with the rest. Clarity creates space. Space creates better decisions. And it's completely okay if some of those decisions take weeks or months to settle. Nothing is wrong with you if you don't feel ready yet. This is a process, and you're allowed to move through it deliberately. So once you start gathering information, this is usually where all the real world constraints show up. You might realize that the numbers don't look the way that you would hope. You might see that keeping the house would stretch you thinner than feels safe. You might also notice how much of this that you've really been carrying on your own, financially, emotionally, logistically, not just physically. Some people hit this point and feel disappointed, sometimes angry, sometimes strangely relieved, even if that relief comes with a side order of grief. This is also where a lot of fears surface. Fear about money and the future, fear about the kids or the pets, fear about doing something irreversible, maybe even fear about whether you'll regret it later, no matter how horrible they are. Or not, they may be lovely. None of that means that you made the wrong decision by looking. It just means that you're seeing the situation more clearly. Limits aren't punishment. They're simply information. They show you what's workable right now and what isn't. They narrow the field so you're not trying to solve 10 impossible versions of the future at once. This is also why people sometimes stop here. Not because they can't move forward, but because they need a minute to let the reality really sink in. But that pause isn't failure. It's just part of the process. After you see the limits clearly, something usually shifts. Not because everything feels resolved or because you finally feel confident or calm, but because you stop arguing with what's already in front of you. This is the point where you acknowledge that this is the situation, this is what exists, and this is what I'm actually working with. Not what you'd hoped would change, or not what you've been waiting for, or not what you've already tried to fix, just what is. That moment matters more than people realize, because once you stop negotiating with reality, your energy stops scattering. You're no longer trying to force answers out of a situation that isn't ready to give them yet. You're simply standing on solid ground. And that doesn't mean that emotions magically disappear. It just means that they're no longer running the show. And once that settles, people usually realize that they need different tools than they thought at the beginning. So now that you know what the house is worth, how it's structured, what the legal landscape looks like, and what your real limits are, the questions tend to change. This is where tools get more specific. So you might realize that you need a second legal opinion or a financial planner to run post-divorce numbers, clarity around buyout options instead of selling, or a realistic timeline instead of a hypothetical one. This is also where people stop asking, what should I do? And start asking what actually works here. That's a good sign. It means that you're no longer reacting, you're responding. And that's the difference between survival decisions and intentional ones. So somewhere around this point, something subtle usually happens. You don't make a big decision. You don't have the conversation yet, and you don't finalize a plan, but you stop pretending that you're undecided. You might notice it when you stop researching how to fix this and start asking questions about what life looks like on the other side. Or when you realize that you're no longer looking for permission, just confirmation that you're thinking clearly. Sometimes it shows up as a sense of calm, and sometimes it shows up as resolve. Sometimes it shows up as a quiet, steady knowing, but you don't feel the need to explain it to anyone yet. Nothing outward has changed, but internally, something has crossed a line. So from here on out, you're no longer gathering information just in case. You're gathering it because you know that you're going to need it. That doesn't mean that everything accelerates. It just means that you're no longer going backward. This is the point that most people don't recognize until later, but it's where momentum actually begins. So from this point forward, every step that you take can be intentional instead of reactive. And that's where this process becomes manageable instead of overwhelming. Only you understand the dynamics of your relationship the way that you do. And in my experience, being prepared gives you way more options. If you're at this point and want help thinking through the house, the timing, the practical side of this transition, that's exactly what I do. You don't have to figure out this part alone. You don't have to carry all of this in your head by yourself. If you'd like a free home evaluation, you can schedule a consult with me using the link in the description. When you book, remember to include your home address in the notes so that I can do some homework before we connect. And if you're not in my area but need an empathetic, steady agent where you live, reach out to me. I'm happy to help you find someone that I trust too. This is a heavy process, and having the right people by your side makes a real difference. Thanks for being here and trusting me with this moment. Chico and I want you to remember, you don't have to rush into anything else today. Let this settle. Take care of yourself and come back to the next step when you're ready. I'll see you in the next one.